The moment Ethan slipped the ring onto my finger, I believed my fairy tale had finally begun. Standing before him in my wedding dress, a cascade of white satin that had cost more than my entire semester's tuition, I felt like the princess I'd never dared to dream of becoming. The ballroom glittered with crystal chandeliers, white roses perfumed the air, and the faces of our 200 guests blurred into a sea of smiles. "You may now kiss the bride," the official announced. Ethan leaned forward, his golden curls catching the light. His eyes, those deep blue eyes that had first noticed me in a crowded university lecture hall 3 years ago, looking at me with what I thought was adoration. His lips touched mine and applause erupted. How did a scholarship girl like me end up marrying the heir to the Jones fortune? I wondered, not for the first time. I never felt I belonged in Ethan's world. At university, while he arrived in his sports car and hosted lavish parties at his family's estate, I worked part-time at the campus library, counting every penny. But when we were paired for a research project in biochemistry, something unexpected happened. Behind his privileged facade, Ethan was struggling, brilliant but unfocused, drowning in expectations. I helped him find his way academically, and somewhere between midnight study sessions and coffee-fueled debates, we fell in love. Or so I thought. "Ladies and gentlemen," the MC's voice boomed through the speakers, cutting through my reverie. "We have a special presentation prepared by a close friend of the couple." My best friend Penelope stepped forward, her bridesmaid's dress clinging perfectly to her curves, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "I've known Violet since we were children," she began, her voice honeyed with false warmth, "and I wanted to give the newlyweds a special gift, a memory to cherish forever." The lights dimmed, a projector screen descended from the ceiling. My heart quickened, sensing something was wrong. Penelope had been acting strange lately, distant and calculating. I'd attributed it to wedding stress, but the look in her eyes now. "This is my gift to you both," she said, pressing a remote control. The screen flickered to life, and the room fell silent, too silent. I turned to look, and my blood froze. There I was, lying naked in a bed that wasn't mine, with a man who wasn't Ethan, Edward, our classmate. My head was turned away, but there was no mistaking my distinctive birthmark visible on my shoulder. The timestamp showed the date of my bachelorette party just 3 nights ago. Gasps filled the room. Whispers hissed through the crowd like snakes. I felt the floor beneath me tilt. "Ethan, I can't," I stammered, turning to him. His face had transformed into something I didn't recognize, pale, taut with rage, his eyes no longer blue, but black with fury. "Is this what you've been doing?" he whispered, each word like ice. "Making a fool of me?" "No." I was drugged. I don't remember anything. Penelope took me to that party, she before I could finish, his hand connected with my cheek. The slap echoed through the ballroom. I staggered backward, tasting blood where my teeth had cut the inside of my lip. 200 guests watched in stunned silence as my fairy tale shattered. "You disgust me," Ethan hissed, his voice trembling. His mother appeared at his side, her aristocratic features twisted with disdain. "I knew it," she said. "A girl from your background could never truly belong in our family." Something inside me broke then, deeper than the humiliation, beyond the pain blooming across my face. I grabbed my skirts, turned, and ran through the ballroom doors, past the confused valet, away from the murmurs and stares. My white heels clattered against the pavement as I fled, my veil streaming behind me like a surrender flag. I had no destination in mind, no plan. My phone was in my purse, which I'd left behind, my wallet too. Just me in a white dress, running through city streets as the sun began to set, mascara streaming down my face, the lingering taste of blood in my mouth. After what felt like hours, my legs gave out. I collapsed onto a park bench, lungs burning, heart shattering anew with each breath. How could this happen? I hadn't betrayed Ethan, I wouldn't. I couldn't remember anything from that night beyond accepting a drink from Penelope, a special bride's mocktail she'd insisted on mixing herself. A mocktail that had made the room spin, my limbs grow heavy. As realization dawned, a new emotion began to replace my despair, anger. White-hot, clarifying anger. I had been set up, drugged, used. But by whom and why? Night was falling now, the park emptying of families and filling with shadows. I should move, find help, but exhaustion pinned me to the bench. My wedding dress, once pristine, was now dirty and torn at the hem like me, damaged, soiled in the eyes of the world. A pained grunt pulled me from my thoughts. An elderly man on a nearby bench was hunched over, his face contorted, one hand clutching his chest. Heart attack. My medical training screamed. I rushed over, years of pre-med instincts kicking in despite my emotional state. Sir, can you hear me? Are you taking any heart medication? I knelt beside him, heedless of my dress sinking into the mud. He nodded weakly, pointing to his pocket. I found a small pill case, recognized the nitroglycerin tablets, and helped him take one. With shaking hands, I grabbed his phone and called for an ambulance. Stay with me, I urged, holding his hand. Help is coming. His breathing gradually steadied as the medication took effect. He looked at me with pain-clouded eyes that gradually focused, taking in my disheveled appearance, the wedding dress, the streaked makeup, the reddened cheek. Thank you, he managed to whisper. You saved me. But why is a bride alone in a park at night? Before I could answer, the ambulance arrived, its lights painting the darkness in red and blue. As paramedics loaded the man onto a stretcher, he gripped my hand with surprising strength. Come with me, he insisted. Please. I hesitated. I had nowhere to go, no one to turn to. My family lived 6 hours away. My friends, could I even call them that now, were back at the reception, probably gossiping over champagne about my disgrace. The man's eyes, kind but insistent, held mine. I'm George Miller, he said, his voice stronger now. And I believe, young lady, that fate has a strange way of bringing the right people together at exactly the right moment. I climbed into the ambulance beside him, still wearing my ruined wedding dress, not knowing that this chance encounter would change the course of my life forever, or that back at the hotel. Ethan was about to discover a truth that would make him question everything he thought he knew about love, betrayal, and the woman he had just cast aside. The hospital corridor felt endless, its fluorescent lights harsh against my swollen eyes. I sat outside the emergency room, still wearing my wedding dress, now stained and crumpled beyond recognition. Several nurses had given me curious glances, but I kept my head down, focusing on the rhythmic ticking of the wall clock. 3 hours had passed since I'd arrived with George Miller. A doctor finally emerged, her expression softening when she spotted me. Are you the young woman who came in with Mr. Miller? She asked. I nodded, standing shakily. You saved his life, she said simply. If you hadn't administered his medication and called for help when you did, he might not have made it. He's asking for you. I followed her through double doors into a private room where George lay connected to monitors, his weathered face brightening when he saw me. My guardian angel in a wedding dress, he said, gesturing to a chair beside his bed. Please sit. Tell me your story. I think we both know you should be somewhere else right now. Something about his gentle manner, so unlike the chaos I'd just fled, broke through my defenses. The words tumbled out, my relationship with Ethan, our different backgrounds, the bachelorette party I barely remembered, the humiliation at the reception. George listened without interruption, his eyes growing increasingly concerned. You were drugged, he said when I finished, not a question but a statement of fact. Someone set you up deliberately. But why? My voice cracked. Who would hate me enough to destroy everything? Sometimes the most vicious betrayals come from those closest to us, George replied, wincing slightly as he adjusted himself. This friend of yours, Penelope, tell me more about her. The question hit me like a physical blow. Penelope, my oldest friend. We'd grown up together, shared everything, but there had always been a competitive edge to our friendship, especially after we both enrolled at the same university. And when Ethan and I became a couple, I whispered. She always said she was happy for me, but sometimes I'd catch her looking at him when she thought no one was watching. And she insisted on planning the bachelorette party, even though I told her I didn't want one. George nodded gravely. And this man in the photo with you, Edward, what's his connection? He was always in Penelope's orbit. They dated briefly in our second year. The pieces were beginning to fit together, forming a picture so ugly I could barely look at it. Oh God, they planned this together, didn't they? Before George could respond, a nurse entered with a sedative for him. As she adjusted his fore, she glanced at me with concern. You should get some rest too, Mississippi. Is there someone I can call for you? Somewhere you can go. The question hung in the air, highlighting my predicament. I had nowhere to go. My apartment had been sublet when Ethan and I decided I would move into his place after the wedding. My family lived hours away, and I couldn't bear the thought of explaining what had happened. She's staying with me, George announced, surprising both me and the nurse. Once I'm discharged. I have a guest house that's sitting empty, and I believe I owe this young woman a great debt. Sir, you don't even know me, I protested weakly. He fixed me with a penetrating gaze. I know enough. You stopped to help a stranger when your own world was falling apart. That tells me everything important about your character. After the nurse left, George explained that he was a widower with no children, living alone in a large estate outside the city. He owned several pharmaceutical companies and research facilities, ironically, in the very field I'd been studying before dropping out to support Ethan's career ambitions. You can stay as long as you need, he said. No strings attached. Time to heal, to think. I don't know if I can accept. Consider it payment for saving my life, he insisted. Besides, I could use the company. That night I slept in a hospital chair, my ruined wedding dress replaced by scrubs a kind nurse had found for me. For the first time in 24 hours, I didn't cry myself to sleep. Instead, I felt numb, suspended between the life I'd lost and whatever uncertain future lay ahead. Meanwhile, across town, Ethan paced his hotel suite, a half-empty bottle of whiskey on the nightstand. His mother had finally left after hours of venomous commentary about my character, my background, how she'd always known I was unsuitable. His phone buzzed for the 100th time, wedding guests, friends, tabloid reporters all clamoring for details of the scandal. He ignored them, his mind replaying the moment that video had appeared on screen. The shock, the rage, the satisfaction he'd felt when his hand connected with my cheek. Shame twisted inside him now. He'd never struck anyone before, let alone a woman. Let alone me. The look in my eyes, confusion, hurt, betrayal, haunted him. Something wasn't adding up. In 3 years together, I'd never given him reason to doubt my fidelity. I was cautious, conservative even. I rarely drank. I blushed when he complimented me in public. Could I really have betrayed him so brazenly days before our wedding? The door to his suite opened. Penelope entered without knocking, her bridesmaid's dress exchanged for a sleek black dress that clung to her curves. I thought you might need company, she said, her voice honey-sweet as she sat down, a bottle of champagne in hand. What a terrible day you've had. Have you heard from Violet? Ethan asked, ignoring her flirtation. Penelope's smile faltered slightly. Why would you care after what she did to you? It just doesn't make sense. He ran a hand through his hair. Violet said she was drugged, that she doesn't remember anything from that night. Of course she'd say that, Penelope scoffed, pouring champagne into 2 glasses. She was caught, Ethan. Red-handed. By whom? Who took that video? And why wait until our wedding day to reveal it? Penelope handed him a glass, stepping closer. Does it matter? The important thing is that you discovered her true nature before it was too late, before you were legally bound to her. Something in her tone made Ethan pause, his glass halfway to his lips. He studied her face, the perfect makeup, the calculating gleam in her eyes. A terrible suspicion began to form. "You were in charge of her bachelorette party," he said slowly. "You insisted on it, even though Violet wanted a quiet dinner instead." "I wanted her to have fun," Penelope shrugged, but her eyes darted away. "And Edward, he just happened to be at this girl's night out? He stopped by later with some friends." "Friends who conveniently had cameras ready?" Penelope's expression hardened. "Why are you interrogating me? I'm the one who showed you the truth. I saved you from marrying a cheater." "Or maybe," Ethan said, setting down his untouched champagne, "you're the one who's been lying all along." He grabbed his phone, scrolling to Edward's number. They weren't close friends, but they'd known each other for years. If anyone could confirm what really happened that night, it would be him. "What are you doing?" Penelope demanded, suddenly pale. "Getting to the truth," Ethan replied, pressing the call button. Penelope lunged for the phone, her composure completely shattered. "You can't." "He won't, I mean." Ethan stared at her, the last pieces clicking into place. "It was you," he whispered. "You set this whole thing up. You were never supposed to be with her." Penelope exploded, her face contorted with rage and jealousy. "She was nobody. A scholarship charity case. I was the one who was always there for you. I was the one who deserved you." The phone connected, Edward's groggy voice answering. "Ethan? Man, it's 2 a.m. "I need to know what really happened at Violet's bachelorette party," Ethan said, his eyes fixed on Penelope's panicked face. "The truth, Edward." "All of it." There was a long pause, then, "I can't do this anymore, man." Penelope said it was just a joke, that we'd tell you guys before the wedding, but then she didn't, and now everything's messed up. Penelope grabbed her purse and ran for the door, but Ethan caught her arm. "What did you do to Violet?" he demanded, his voice deadly quiet. Edward's voice continued from the speaker. "Penelope put something in Violet's drink. She passed out cold. We just laid her on the bed and took some photos to make it look like, but nothing happened, I swear." Ethan's world tilted for the second time that day. I had been telling the truth. I had been drugged, set up, framed by my own best friend, and he had believed the worst of me without a moment's hesitation, had publicly humiliated me, had struck me. "Where is Violet now?" he asked Penelope, his grip tightening on her arm. "How should I know?" she spat. "Running home to mommy, probably." But when Ethan called my parents, they hadn't heard from me. My phone went straight to voicemail. My apartment was dark, the neighbors hadn't seen me. It was as if I had vanished. Frantic, Ethan drove to the wedding venue, retracing the path I might have taken when I fled. The night was cold, the streets emptying as dawn approached. A woman in a wedding dress couldn't have gone unnoticed, yet no one he asked had seen me. As the first light of dawn broke over the city, Ethan stood in the park where I had unwittingly met George Miller, though he would never know this, his face haggard, his wedding suit rumpled, the ring he'd meant to wear for the rest of his life heavy in his pocket. "I will find you, Violet," he whispered to the rising sun. "And I will spend the rest of my life making this right." But what he didn't know was that by then I was miles away, emerging from the hospital with George at my side, stepping into a sleek black car that would take me to a new life, a life where Ethan Jones was part of a past I intended to leave behind forever. What neither of us knew was that inside me, a new life was already taking form, a tiny, fluttering secret that would bind us together no matter how far apart we might be. 6 weeks after what should have been my wedding day, I stood in the bathroom of George's guest house, staring at the pregnancy test in my trembling hands. 2 pink lines, unmistakable. I sank to the cool tile floor, my emotions a storm of fear, uncertainty, and, surprisingly, a flicker of joy. A child. Ethan's child. Conceived during our last night together before the wedding, a night filled with whispered promises and plans for the future. A future that no longer existed. I hadn't spoken to Ethan since I ran from the reception. My phone remained off, and I'd asked George not to reveal my whereabouts to anyone. The media had briefly buzzed with the scandal, heir to the Jones fortune left at the altar after bride's infidelity exposed, but the story had faded, replaced by newer, shinier scandals. George had been true to his word. His guest house became my sanctuary, a peaceful retreat set among gardens on his sprawling estate. After recovering from his heart attack, he'd taken a genuine interest in my well-being, respecting my privacy while offering gentle guidance. I told him about my abandoned medical studies, my research interests, my dreams that had gradually been replaced by Ethan's. "Why did you give it all up?" he'd asked one evening as we shared dinner on the terrace. I'd struggled to explain how love had slowly eroded my ambitions, how Ethan hadn't explicitly asked me to defer my dreams, but his needs had somehow always taken precedence, his family's expectations, his career, his social obligations. "That doesn't sound like love," George had observed, his eyes kind but direct. "That sounds like surrender." Now, sitting on the bathroom floor with evidence of new life in my hands, I faced the biggest decision of my life. Could I raise a child alone? Should I tell Ethan? Did he deserve to know after what he'd done? A knock on the door startled me. "Violet, are you all right?" George's concerned voice called. "The doctor is here for my checkup, but I can reschedule if you need anything." I quickly hid the test and opened the door, forcing a smile. "I'm fine. Go ahead with your appointment. I might take a walk in the garden." George studied my face, clearly unconvinced, but nodded. "We'll talk later, then." Outside, spring was giving way to summer. The estate gardens bloomed with roses and lavender, the air heavy with their scent. I wandered aimlessly, one hand unconsciously resting on my still flat abdomen. I needed to make plans, decisions. But first, I needed to face the truth about my relationship with Ethan. Had I trouble? Somewhere along the way, I'd lost myself in his world, his priorities, his vision for our future. Maybe this child was a second chance, a reason to reclaim the woman I'd been before. Ambitious, independent, driven, or perhaps an entirely new version of myself, stronger, wiser. A mother. By the time I returned to the house, I had made my decision. I found George in his study, poring over medical journals. "I'm pregnant," I announced without preamble. He looked up, surprise evident on his face, then gestured for me to sit. "Ethan?" he asked gently. I nodded. "I'm keeping the baby, and I want to go back to school, finish my medical degree." The words felt right as soon as I spoke them. "But I don't want Ethan to know." "Not yet. Maybe not ever." "That's a significant decision," George cautioned. "Are you sure?" He humiliated me, struck me, believed the worst of me without a moment's doubt, I said, the memory still raw. "He doesn't deserve to be part of this child's life. Not until he proves himself worthy. And if he never does, then my child and I will be fine without him." The certainty in my voice surprised even me. George was quiet for a long moment. "What about your studies? Raising a child while in medical school won't be easy. I know. But I'm done abandoning my dreams for a man." I straightened my shoulders. "I've been thinking about specializing in pharmacological research. It's always fascinated me." A smile spread across George's face. "Interesting coincidence. I happen to own several research facilities in exactly that field, and we fund scholarships for promising students." He leaned forward. "Violet, I have a proposition for you. Let me help you, financially and otherwise. Complete your education, work in one of my labs if you wish, whatever you need for yourself and your child." "Why would you do that for me?" I asked, overwhelmed by his generosity. "I told you before, you saved my life. But it's more than that." His eyes grew distant. "My wife and I couldn't have children. We always planned to mentor young people, create a legacy beyond our business. Then she died, and I lost my way." He refocused on me. "Perhaps this is the purpose I've been seeking, a chance to make a difference in your life and in your child's." Tears welled in my eyes. I don't know what to say. "Say yes," he urged. "Let me help you build the future you deserve." That evening marked the beginning of my new life. Within weeks, I was enrolled in medical school again, my pregnancy accommodated by understanding professors. George converted part of his home into a nursery, insisting that the baby and I move into the main house where help would be readily available. As my belly grew, so did my confidence. I excelled in my studies, reconnecting with the intellectual passion I'd suppressed for too long. George became a mentor, then a friend, and eventually a father figure to me. We spent evenings discussing research papers, debating ethical dilemmas in medicine, planning for the baby's arrival. In my 7th month, while reviewing patient files for a case study, I came across a name that made my heart stop: Ethan Jones. He had been treated for exhaustion and malnutrition at the university hospital where I was doing clinical rotations. The notes mentioned he had experienced significant personal loss and was showing signs of depression. I closed the file quickly, my hands shaking. For months, I'd successfully pushed thoughts of Ethan to the farthest corners of my mind. Now the image of him lying in a hospital bed, diminished and suffering, infiltrated my carefully constructed defenses. "He's not your responsibility," I whispered to myself, cradling my rounded abdomen where his child grew. "You owe him nothing." But that night, dreams of Ethan haunted me, not the enraged man who had struck me at our wedding, but the boy who had looked at me with wonder when I explained complex biochemical processes. The man who had held me through the night when I received news of my grandmother's death. Morning brought clarity. Whatever Ethan was going through, it was his journey, not mine. I had my own path now and a responsibility to the life growing inside me. 2 months later, after 18 hours of labor, I gave birth to a daughter. She had Ethan's blue eyes, but my dark hair and determined chin. As I held her for the first time, an overwhelming love surged through me, fierce, protective, absolute. "Annabelle," I whispered, the name I'd chosen months ago. "Annabelle Marie." George, who had paced the hospital corridor throughout my labor, cried when he held her. "She's perfect," he declared, becoming the doting grandfather Annabelle would grow to adore. The years passed in a blur of late-night feedings, research breakthroughs, hard-earned academic achievements, and Annabelle's milestones. By the time she was 4, I had completed my medical degree with honors and was heading a promising research team at one of George's facilities. My work on targeted drug delivery systems was garnering attention in the scientific community, leading to speaking engagements at conferences around the world. Annabelle thrived in our unconventional family. She was bright, curious, and kind, with a natural empathy that melted the hearts of everyone she met. She asked about her father occasionally, and I told her simplified versions of the truth, that he and I had loved each other once, but weren't right for each other, that he didn't know about her because of complicated adult reasons, that someday, when the time was right, they might meet. I kept track of Ethan from a distance. After recovering from his breakdown, he had thrown himself into expanding his family's business, opening clinics in underserved communities, establishing foundations for abuse victims. The tabloids occasionally linked him with various socialites, but no relationship seemed to last. I wondered if he was still searching for me, still trying to make amends, but I hardened my heart against such thoughts. Until fate intervened once again. 5 years after Annabelle's birth, I was invited to present my research at an international medical conference in Geneva. George insisted on coming along, both to support me and to enjoy a European adventure with Annabelle. My presentation was scheduled for the 2nd day of the conference. Standing at the podium before hundreds of colleagues, I felt a confidence that would have been foreign to the girl who had once shrunk in the shadow of Ethan's family. I spoke clearly, passionately about our team's breakthroughs, fielding complex questions with ease. As the session ended and attendees began to file out, I gathered my materials, riding the high of professional fulfillment. A movement at the back of the hall caught my eye, a tall figure remaining seated while others left. Something about his posture, the set of his shoulders, sent a jolt of recognition through me before I could even see his face clearly. When the crowd thinned, There was no mistaking him. Ethan, older, his face more angular, a touch of gray at his temples, but those eyes, the same blue eyes that I saw every day in my daughter's face, fixed on me with an intensity that made the room seem to disappear. He stood slowly, as if afraid I might flee if he moved too quickly. I remained frozen at the podium, my heart hammering against my ribs. 5 years of emotional distance evaporated in an instant, leaving me raw and exposed. Ethan began walking toward me, navigating around empty chairs. In those endless seconds, my mind raced. Did he know about Annabelle? Had he tracked me down deliberately? Was this a coincidence, or destiny reasserting itself? Before he could reach me, the conference moderator approached with urgent questions from the event organizers. By the time I finished addressing her concerns, Ethan was just steps away. "Violet," he said my name, a prayer on his lips. "I've been looking for you for so long." Words failed me. Up close, I could see the changes in him, lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before, a gravitas that had replaced his youthful arrogance. "You were brilliant up there," he continued when I didn't respond. "I always knew you would be. What are you doing here, Ethan?" I finally managed, my voice steadier than I felt. "I attend every major medical conference," he said. "I've been searching for you at each one. After I expanded into healthcare, it seemed possible our paths might cross eventually." He paused, his expression vulnerable in a way I'd rarely seen. "I had to find you, to tell you how sorry I am, to beg your forgiveness even knowing I don't deserve it." A commotion at the door interrupted us. Annabelle burst into the hall, breaking away from George, who was trying to corral her. "Mama," she called, running toward me with the unrestrained enthusiasm of childhood. "You were amazing." I watched from the special box with Grandpa George. Time slowed as Ethan turned toward the sound of her voice. I saw the exact moment recognition dawned in his eyes, the mathematical impossibility of denying her parentage when she was so clearly a blend of both of us. Annabelle reached us, wrapping her arms around my legs. "Mama, Grandpa says we can have ice cream to celebrate." My hand moved protectively to her shoulder as I looked from my daughter to the man who had unknowingly helped create her, the man who had no legal claim to her but whose blood ran in her veins. Ethan stared at Annabelle, then at me, shock and understanding transforming his features. "Violet," he whispered, his voice breaking, "is she?" Before I could answer, George appeared, slightly out of breath from chasing after Annabelle. He stopped short when he saw Ethan, recognition and wariness flashing across his face. "Annabelle, darling," I said, finding my voice at last, "this is an old friend of mine." I met Ethan's gaze, silently warning him not to contradict me. "Why don't you go with Grandpa to get that ice cream?" "I need to talk to my friend for a few minutes." Annabelle studied Ethan curiously. "You have eyes like mine," she observed with a child's directness. Ethan knelt to her level, his movements careful as if approaching a wild creature. "Yes," he said softly, "I suppose I do." George stepped forward, clearly protective. "Come on, princess. Let's give your mother some space." He led Annabelle away, glancing back at me with concern. I nodded slightly, letting him know I would be all right. When they were gone, Ethan and I faced each other in the empty conference hall, 5 years of separation and secrets between us. The weight of what had been lost, and what had been created in that loss, hung in the air like a physical presence. "She's mine," he said, a statement rather than a question. "She's mine," I corrected, my voice firm. "You may have contributed to her existence, but you have no claim to her life." Pain flashed across his face. "I've spent 5 years searching for you, Violet. 5 years trying to make amends for the worst mistake of my life. And all this time, I had a daughter I knew nothing about. You surrendered any right to know her the moment you chose to believe I would betray you," I said, old anger rising to the surface. "The moment you humiliated me in front of everyone we knew. The moment you raised your hand to me." "I know," he whispered, his voice raw. "I know what I did is unforgivable. But Violet, please, she's my child too." "Is she?" I challenged. Where were you when I discovered I was pregnant? When I was sick every morning for months? When I went through labor? When she took her first steps, said her first word, had her first fever that terrified me? You never gave me the chance to be there, he countered, his calm cracking slightly. You disappeared without a trace. I hired investigators. I searched everywhere. I contacted every mutual friend, every hospital, every university. And did any of those investigators tell you what Penelope did? How she drugged me, set me up, destroyed what we had. Yes, he admitted, his shoulders slumping. Penelope confessed everything that night. Edward confirmed it. I tried to find you immediately, to beg your forgiveness, but you were gone. We stared at each other, the gulf between us suddenly too vast to bridge with mere words. She deserves to know her father, Ethan said finally, his voice quiet but determined. And I deserve a chance to know my daughter. Before I could respond, my phone chimed with a text from George. Annabelle wants to know if your friend can join us for ice cream. What should I tell her? I looked up from the screen to find Ethan watching me, hope and fear warring in his expression. 5 years of carefully constructed independence hung in the balance. 5 years of telling myself I needed no one, that Annabelle and I were complete without him. But in my daughter's innocent question was a truth I couldn't deny. Children long to know where they come from, who they come from. And Annabelle, for all her happiness, had always been curious about the father-shaped hole in her life created by my careful omissions. I'm not asking to disrupt your lives, Ethan said, as if reading my thoughts. I can see you've built something beautiful. But please, Violet, give me a chance to be part of it on whatever terms you set. Outside the conference hall windows, the sun was setting over Lake Geneva, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Somewhere in the city, my daughter was waiting for an answer that would shape the course of all our lives. I took a deep breath, about to give Ethan my decision, a decision that would either open the door to reconciliation or close it forever, when my phone rang. George's name flashed on the screen. Violet, his voice was tight with barely controlled panic. It's Annabelle. We were crossing the street to the ice cream shop when a car, his voice broke. We're in an ambulance. They say it's serious. You need to come now. The phone slipped from my numb fingers. Ethan caught it, his reflexes still quick, his expression changing as he heard George's frantic voice continuing from the speaker. What hospital? He asked sharply, taking charge in a crisis as he always had. We're on our way. As we raced through the streets of Geneva toward the hospital where my daughter, our daughter, fought for her life, I realized that fate had once again taken the decision out of my hands. Whatever the future held for the three of us, it would begin tonight, forged in the crucible of a parent's worst fear. The hospital waiting room was a blur of sterile lights and hushed voices. I sat rigid, my fingers twisted together so tightly they had lost sensation. Beside me, Ethan paced, his controlled demeanor cracking with each passing minute. George sat across from us, his face ashen, still blaming himself for the accident. It happened so fast, he had explained when we arrived, his voice hollow. The car came around the corner. I tried to pull her back, but his words had dissolved into silent tears. Annabelle had been in surgery for 3 hours, multiple fractures, internal bleeding, head trauma. The doctor's clinical assessment echoed in my mind like a nightmare, my brilliant, vibrant 5-year-old now fighting for her life because of a split-second tragedy. Family of Annabelle Reyes? A surgeon appeared, still wearing her scrub cap, fatigue etched in the lines around her eyes. I stood on unsteady legs. I'm her mother. The surgeon glanced at Ethan, who had stopped pacing and now stood rigidly beside me. And you are her father, he said without hesitation, his hand finding the small of my back in an unconscious gesture of support. I didn't correct him. In this moment of crisis, biological truth trumped the complications of our past. The surgery was difficult. The surgeon began. She lost a significant amount of blood. We've stabilized the internal bleeding and set the fractures, but she hesitated. Annabelle needs a transfusion. She has a rare blood type, B negative. Our supplies are limited. Test me, Ethan, and I said simultaneously. I'm B positive, I added, already knowing I wouldn't be a match. I'm B negative, Ethan said quietly. The surgeon nodded. We'll test you right away, sir. As Ethan followed a nurse to give blood, George moved to sit beside me. He hasn't left your side since we got here, he observed. Of course he's here, I whispered. He's her father. It's more than that, George said. He still loves you, Violet. I've seen enough in my lifetime to recognize it. Before I could respond, Ethan returned. They're taking my blood now, he said, rolling down his sleeve. The doctor says it's a match. Relief washed through me. My daughter would receive her father's blood, the most basic connection possible between parent and child. Something symbolic in that, perhaps. Thank you, I managed, meeting his eyes fully for the first time since our confrontation at the conference. She's my daughter, he replied simply. I'd give her every drop if she needed it. Hours passed. Midnight came and went. George eventually succumbed to exhaustion, dozing in his chair. Ethan and I remained awake, keeping vigil in a fragile truce. Tell me about her, Ethan said softly, breaking the silence. What's she like? The question opened a floodgate. Suddenly I needed him to know everything. Annabelle's first words, her love of dinosaurs, how she insisted on wearing mismatched socks, her uncanny ability to make friends wherever she went. He listened intently, occasionally asking questions, his eyes reflecting grief for all the moments he'd missed. She has your scientific mind, I told him. Always experimenting, testing boundaries. And your determination, he added. I saw that in just the few seconds before he couldn't finish the sentence. Without planning to, I found myself asking the question that had haunted me for 5 years. What happened to you, Ethan? After I left? He was quiet for a long moment. I fell apart, he finally admitted. Once I realized what Penelope had done, what I had done to you. I couldn't forgive myself. I drank too much, neglected the business, ended up hospitalized. I know, I said. I saw your file during my rotation. His eyes widened slightly. You knew I was there, and you didn't. I couldn't, I said simply. I was pregnant, rebuilding my life. I couldn't risk being pulled back into your orbit. He nodded slowly. After the hospital, I started therapy, began to understand how my upbringing had shaped me, my father's temper, my mother's emotional manipulation. It doesn't excuse what I did to you, but it helped me change. He paused. I redirected the business toward healthcare, hoping somehow I'd cross paths with you again. And now we're here, I whispered, under the worst possible circumstances. Annabelle will pull through, he said with fierce conviction. She has your strength. A doctor approached before I could respond. Mrs. Reyes, your daughter is stable. The transfusion was successful. She's being moved to intensive care. Can we see her? I asked, already standing. Briefly. She's heavily sedated. Ethan and I followed the doctor through silent corridors to the ICU. Nothing could have prepared me for the sight of my vibrant child lying motionless among tubes and monitors, her small body dwarfed by medical equipment. I moved to her bedside, gently touching her hand. Ethan hung back, uncertainty written across his features. It's okay, I said softly. Come meet your daughter properly. He approached slowly, as if in a dream. When he reached the bed, tears spilled freely down. I'm here, sweetheart, I assured her, leaning closer. Her gaze drifted to Ethan, confusion giving way to recognition. Blue eyes like mine, she whispered before slipping back into unconsciousness. Ethan looked at me over our daughter's bed, his face transformed by emotion. In that moment, I saw not the man who had once struck me in anger, but a father seeing his child for the first time, vulnerable, terrified, and filled with a love he hadn't known himself capable of feeling. I won't lose her now, he said, his voice breaking. I can't. Either of you. As dawn broke over Geneva, casting golden light through the hospital windows, I faced a truth I'd been running from for 5 years. Forgiveness wasn't about erasing the past, but about finding a way forward, for Annabelle's sake, and perhaps for my own. What I didn't yet know was that our journey was far from over. The greatest challenges and most difficult choices still lay ahead. 3 months after the accident in Geneva, I stood in the garden of George's estate, watching Annabelle chase butterflies through the flower beds. Her recovery had been remarkable. Children's resilience never ceased to amaze me. The cast on her arm was the only visible reminder of that terrible night. Ethan sat on a nearby bench, his attention never straying from our daughter. After Annabelle was discharged from the hospital, I had surprised everyone, including myself, by inviting him to stay with us during her recovery. What had been intended as a temporary arrangement had gradually evolved into something more permanent. "She wants to show you her science experiment," I said, approaching him. "Something about growing crystals. She's been working on it all week." Ethan smiled, the expression transforming his face in a way that still caught me off guard. "I brought her the books on crystallography she asked for. She's already reading at twice her grade level." "Like her father," I acknowledged, sitting beside him. He turned to me, his expression serious. "Violet, we need to talk about what happens next." I nodded. We'd been circling this conversation for weeks, both of us afraid to disturb the fragile peace we'd established. "My leave of absence from the company ends next month," he continued. "I need to return to Madrid, at least temporarily." The thought of him leaving created an unexpected hollow feeling in my chest. These months together had revealed a changed man, patient, thoughtful, dedicated to rebuilding trust one small gesture at a time. He'd never pushed for more than I was willing to give, content to focus on being a father to Annabelle. "We could come with you," I suggested, surprising myself. "Annabelle has been asking to see where you work, and I could use the research facilities at your Madrid branch for my next project." Hope brightened his eyes. "Are you sure? What about George?" "George understands," I said softly. "He's always known this day might come." As if summoned by our conversation, George appeared from the house, moving more slowly these days, but still determined to be part of every family gathering. "Annabelle wants both of you to see her experiment," he announced, smiling at the domestic tableau we presented. "She's very insistent." We followed him inside to the small laboratory he had created for my research, now frequently commandeered by my science-obsessed daughter. Annabelle stood proudly beside a table where various crystal formations grew in solution. "Look what I made," she exclaimed. "Grandpa helped me with the chemicals, but I did the measurements myself." As she launched into a detailed explanation that belied her 5 years, I found myself studying Ethan, the tenderness in his eyes as he knelt to examine her work, the patient way he answered her rapid-fire questions. I barely recognized the arrogant young man I'd almost married. Suffering and remorse had reshaped him, just as they had reshaped me. That evening, after Annabelle was asleep, Ethan and I sat on the terrace beneath a sky scattered with stars. George had tactfully retired early, leaving us to the conversation we'd been postponing. "I don't expect things to go back to how they were," Ethan said, breaking the comfortable silence. "I know too much has happened. But being here with you and Annabelle, it feels right, Violet. Like the family we were meant to be. We can't erase the past," I reminded him gently. "I don't want to erase it," he countered. "Our past made us who we are now. Made us better, I think." He reached slowly for my hand, giving me time to pull away. I didn't. "I'm not asking for marriage or promises, just a chance to build something new together." The question hung between us, weighted with 5 years of separation and 3 months of cautious reunion. Could we move forward? Should we? "I forgave you some time ago," I admitted. "Holding on to anger was hurting me more than you. But trusting again, that's harder." "I know," he said. "I'll spend the rest of my life earning that trust back, if you'll let me." I thought of Annabelle, whose joy at having her father in her life was unmistakable. Of George, who had become my second father and who had, surprisingly, developed a genuine friendship with Ethan based on their shared love for Annabelle and me. Of the life we might build together, not a fairy tale, but something real and hard won. Madrid, I said finally. We'll start with Madrid, see how it goes. His smile was like sunrise. That's all I'm asking for. A beginning. 2 weeks later, we stood at George's grave, Annabelle between us, all of us shell-shocked by how quickly everything had changed. The second heart attack had come in the night, peaceful but final. George was gone, leaving behind a legacy that extended far beyond his business empire. He left you everything, Ethan said softly as we walked away from the cemetery. All the companies, the estate, everything. And you as co-trustee for Annabelle's portion, I added. He thought of everything. In his final letter to me, George had written, "Love is not a straight line, my dear. It curves and doubles back, sometimes breaking before growing stronger at the mended places. Don't be afraid to follow where it leads." Madrid would wait. First, we had a life to settle, a legacy to honor, and a foundation to build, literally. George's last wish was for us to establish a research center for rare diseases in Annabelle's name, combining my scientific expertise with Ethan's business acumen. 6 months after George's funeral, I stood in the newly completed laboratory, surrounded by state-of-the-art equipment and a team of brilliant researchers. Through the glass walls, I could see Ethan in the administrative wing, deep in conversation with board members. We had found our rhythm. Professional partners, co-parents, and gradually, hesitantly, something more. That evening, we walked through the gardens that had become our family sanctuary. Annabelle ran ahead, her energy fully restored, her future bright with possibilities. I never imagined this, I confessed, watching our daughter. That night at our wedding, when everything fell apart, I thought my life was over. But it was just beginning. Ethan took my hand, a gesture that had become natural again. Do you ever regret it? How things happened? I considered the question carefully. I regret the pain, the wasted years, but not the outcome, not who we've become. As the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of fire and gold, Ethan drew me close. I love you, Violet. I never stopped. The words hung in the twilight between us, not a question, but a simple truth that had weathered storms and emerged stronger. I know, I whispered, finally allowing myself to rest against his shoulder. I love you too. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. It was something better, a real beginning, built on broken pieces made whole again, stronger at the mended places, just as George had predicted. And that, I realized as Ethan's arms encircled me and Annabelle ran back to join our embrace, was the most beautiful story of all.